And U.S. Democrats plan to introduce a bill to Congress to overturn President Donald Trump's executive order, which bans entry of Muslims from 7 predominantly Muslim nations.
Well, first, I heard that John McCain spoke out strongly against it. We should have other Republicans speaking out against it, and maybe we can pass something in the Congress. We can only do it with Republican support to at least undo this or stay it. But second, this is unconstitutional. If we get a few more Republicans, I think we might be able to pass legislation to overturn it. It'll be up to getting more Republicans.
I meant to say refugees from 7 predominantly Muslim dominated countries. Now, Schumer says Trump's immigration order makes Americans less humanitarian and less safe, demanding a Trump reverse the action. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell also urged Washington to be careful about how it implements the order. Republican senator reminded that Muslims were some of America's best sources in the war against terrorism, both at home and overseas. Democrat attorneys general throughout the country also condemned Trump's decision in a joint statement, calling it dangerous and unconstitutional. They said that they'd fight together to ensure the federal government respected the Constitution. Meanwhile, federal judges in Massachusetts, Virginia, and Washington followed a New York judge in blocking authorities from enforcing Trump's Muslim ban. And joining us out of Virginia now is Mr. Robert David Steele, former CIA clandestine case officer. Hello, Mr. Steele. Thanks for joining us on the program, sir. Now, do you think Donald Trump cares about the fallout that we're witnessing with respect to his executive order, the protests and the opposition from the U.S.'s closest allies?
The short answer is yes, he does care. He was sandbagged. He has an incompetent press secretary. His team is amateurish and ham-fisted. This should have never, ever been done until the Secretary of State was in position, confirmed by Congress, and able to do a 30-day study. This would normally have been coordinated with all attorneys general. There would have been a media campaign planned for it. And I really respectfully point out to all of you that there are only 173 people affected. These crowds did not happen by accident. These crowds were funded by George Soros. This is a follow-on to the Women's March. This is another attempt by the Democrats to delegitimize Donald Trump, who was elected against opposition, not only from the Democrats, but from all of the Republicans, including Paul Ryan. Yes, Trump is upset, but Trump has only himself to blame because he has a shallow staff that isn't ready for the big league.
And what do you think chances are now, sir, that lawmakers will be able to join to reverse this order? Now, we saw in that Philadelphia GOP retreat that Republicans are warming up quite a bit to their new elected president.
Donald Trump may be the greatest president in U.S. history if he does not get impeached and forced to resign, which is my concern. The chances of this being reversed are near zero unless the George Soros-funded protests and the media, which is, of course, on the side of George Soros and the protests. Again, everyone forgets this is about 173 people. This is not about 50,000 people or 100,000 people. It's about 173 people. This is mass street theater against Donald Trump. And all of you have to realize that Iran and Donald Trump have one very big thing in common. You agree that we should only pay half price for Boeing. Start there.
And one last question. We've seen Donald Trump do or say something almost every day to cause an uproar. Now, do you see him lasting? You just mentioned, you alluded to it. I'm actually alluding to what you just said. Do you see him lasting 4 years in office at this pace? Why or why not?
The short answer is I do not see him lasting 4 years in office because he has traitors among him. His chief of staff, Reince Priebus's highest priority is to prevent Donald Trump from unrigging the system. If Donald Trump had good advisors, he would have an Electoral Reform Act that gave him the power to connect with all U.S. citizens, not only the 27% that voted for him. So Trump is very much at risk. Many of us are anticipating that he will be forced out before 2018. However, if he does an Electoral Reform Act, if he strengthens his counterintelligence and cleans the traitors out of the White House, then he could be the greatest president in modern history. I'm not sure which way it's going to go.
Well, I mean, what was that quote that he employed early on? He said he was going to drain the swamp in Washington, something to that effect. but it seems like all he did was just appoint a bunch of swamp monsters for his cabinet.
You're asking a very, very important and clever question. U.S. politics is like 4 levels of chess, and Donald Trump is a genius at the new politics. The Goldman Sachs guys can be looked on in 2 ways. They're either Goldman Sachs owns Donald Trump, or Donald Trump has recruited exactly the right guys he needs to take Goldman Sachs down. Now, he has beat back, with my help and some others, the coup d'etat by John Brennan and the CIA. The soft coup is over. We won. But the war is not over. George Soros, Hillary Clinton, John Brennan, all of these people are waging a war against Donald Trump. So I would urge your viewers to consider that these protests in the street are organized protests funded by George Soros. They have nothing to do with the actual executive order itself, which was ham-fisted and amateurish. I absolutely agree. Trump has a lot to learn. But right now, he is failing because others are making better use of mass media against him.
But I mean, one of the controversial things about this order, it's banning, people from countries that have nothing to do with terrorism. Why is Saudi Arabia and the Emirates and certain other countries not on that list?
Well, actually, I think you're absolutely right. Not only should Saudi Arabia and Pakistan be on that list, but so should the United Kingdom. The fact is, this was a badly executed order. If I were Rex Tillerson right now, I would be rethinking whether I wanted to be Secretary of State. I would be having a serious conversation with Donald Trump, saying essentially, do this again and I'm gone.
Thank you for your valuable input, Mr. Robert David Steele, joining us out of Virginia, former CIA clandestine case officer. Now, Saudi Arabia and the United States have accused Iran of playing a destabilizing role in the region. The Saudi King Salman and the U.S. President Donald Trump agreed via phone call to address what they called Iran's destabilizing regional activities. Meanwhile, a White House statement says Trump and Salman want to rigorously enforce the Iran nuclear deal. They also agreed to establish safe zones in war-ravaged Syria and Yemen. Saudi Arabia is part of a so-called U.S.-led coalition against terrorism, but both countries are widely blamed for backing and arming terrorist groups in their fight against government forces in Syria and Iraq. Now, Iran says the future of Syria and Iraq must be decided by the people of those countries. And joining us now at Bristol once again is Mr. Tony Gosling, investigative journalist. Hello there, Tony, and thanks for joining us back on the program. Tony, many critics are extremely concerned that a U.S. president with little or no understanding of Middle East politics will further destabilize the region, and this Washington-Riyadh relationship is one of those topics of concern. Your thoughts?
Yes, I think you're right. He is going to be destabilizing things, although it does look as if the Russian alliance between with Assad is kind of blocking the US in Syria. But look, let's just have a look at this guy, Mad Dog James Mattis, that he's appointing the Secretary of Defense. You're talking there about somebody who urged Trump not to end support for Syrian rebels back on the 1st of December last year. We're now in the situation where we're being told that Syrian refugees from that conflict, there's an indefinite ban on them, dovetailing with the previous story. Also with Iraq and Sudan and Libya and Yemen and Iran, of course. So this blocking of people who are coming from this part of the world is absolutely appalling, considering that people like James Mattis are actually still saying, or at least he was in December, that the rebels should be being armed. These are people that most people in the world don't call them rebels, they call them terrorists. So I think that what's happening is you've got kind of blowback, what they call blowback, which is why one of the reasons that Trump is trying to stop people coming into the United States. But actually, the 9/11 attacks were apparently conducted, we're told, from a cave in Afghanistan. So how is it going to help him at all?
And according to many critics, Iran is fighting terrorism, and asking for help to continue fighting terrorism. And Riyadh promotes a strict Wahhabi doctrine, which actually promotes terrorism, which it also is very eager to export to regional countries. Yet you hear nothing out of the West about this known fact. Why?
I mean, it's because it's propaganda, effectively. I mean, what we've had for the last few decades is these various different, I suppose you could call them fake versions of the Abrahamic religions, the Abrahamic faiths. I mean, if you think of people like Benjamin Netanyahu and Tzipi Livni as Jewish leaders, well, actually, these people are what many would call them. In fact, in Malaysia, they have been successfully tried as war criminals. You've also got, in the Christian world, the Bush and Blair characters, supposed Christians. Maybe did they pray together? There is a certain amount of doubt about that. But they certainly portrayed themselves as Christians. And then we've got the Wahhabism faith, and we've got ISIS. So we've got fake versions of these Abrahamic faiths. Actually, of course, there's Zionism too. Many people say that is a kind of fake form of Judaism. So I think that's effectively what we're dealing with here. And these are set up deliberately, these fake versions of these various faiths, including Islam, in order for people like Donald Trump try and shoot them down, to criticize them. Effectively, I don't think he's going to be successful in all of this. And if he does pursue this policy he is at the moment, there's going to be more problems. Saudi Arabia, I think, is almost a busted flush, which is worrying, because if the US loses that part of its influence in the Middle East, one wonders where it's going to go next to gain influence. It may be that this will provoke the US to even more extreme action if Saudi Arabia starts to crumble, and it's certainly not looking. The royal family there, the dictatorship effectively, is not looking very stable at the moment.
Thank you, Tony, once again for your input and your contribution to the program. That was Tony Gosling, investigative journalist, joining us out of Bristol.
I'm Lauren Green, and this is Bias Bash. The Trump administration is not holding back any punches when it comes to dealing with the mainstream media. Speaking to the New York Times in an interview, a chief strategist and senior counsel to the president, Steve Bannon, referred to the media as the, quote, opposition party. Bannon says they don't understand this country and why Mr. Trump is the president. Here with her reaction is political commentator Mick Pike. Thank you so much, Erin.
Thank
Welcome.
you. Thanks.
So is this yet another example of Trump's war on the media, or is the media truly trying to oppose the president at every turn?
Well, look, I do think that it is part of Trump's war on the media, certainly. I do think the press invited this because they have been so adversarial to Trump throughout the campaign, and it's really in the first week of his presidency. So it's not any surprise that Stephen Bannon or that Donald Trump would say this. It obviously is not good because it doesn't tamp down any of the rhetoric. And so the press will continue to fight Trump and continue to be adversarial throughout his presidency unless one of these sides gives in a little bit.
You know, one of the things that's missing, though, from a lot of the reporting on what Steve Bannon said is just sort of the specifics. Exactly what is he referring to, and was it true or not?
Well, right, and we can guess that he means just that, the mainstream media, that he's talking about big outlets, big institutions like the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and then the big networks. Because it's clear that the Trump administration and much of that press team looks to other forms of new media. They're bringing in Skype seats, rotating Skype seats to the briefing room to get other reporters from around the country to be able to cover what's going on in the White House and ask questions. And they're calling out a lot of different new outlets that have only been in existence for a couple of years. So it's not that the Trump team views all media as the opposition party. It's just that institutional part that has been a part of American media for so long.
Well, see, this is one of the problems. Are you opposed to the media because they're reporting wrongly, or are you opposed to the media because they just don't agree with what you're saying? I mean, gone are the days, perhaps, that the politician respects a journalist, even though they don't agree with them?
Yeah, I think that might be. Look, I think a lot of times reporters have invited this because we need to do some introspection on ourselves, and I think a lot of times reporters look at a politician in the sense that they want to take that politician down, go to war with that politician when they ask them questions, and I don't think that's right. I think we need to be skeptical. I think we need to ask good probing questions, but not approach every interview with the politician as though it's going to be a fight. So I think both sides need to kind of change this. Now, the other thing I would say is it helps President Trump to call the media the opposition party, because what does that do? It takes the spotlight off of Democrats entirely. Right now, there is a big race going on to run the Democratic Party, to run the DNC, and nobody's paying attention to that race. And Democrats can't get a word in edgewise into really any news broadcast or any major story, because right now we're so focused on the Trump team, on Congress, which is run by Republicans, and then this fight with the media. So it's almost as if the Democrats don't exist right now, which is only helpful to Trump because it helps him push his agenda. So that's the motivation for calling the media the opposition party. They know that the media will run wild with that accusation.
It's very interesting because as much as he's opposed to the media, he's actually controlling it more than anybody.
That's right.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Aaron.
Thank you.
And to hear more media analysis on the week's top headlines, catch Media Buzz with Howard Kurtz, Sundays at 11 a.m. Eastern and again at 5 p.m. Eastern on the Fox News Channel. I'm Lauren Green, and thanks for watching.